Welcome back in. Major League Baseball, almost to the postseason. We've reached it. This is the Geico Outkick Studios. Jon Morosi, are you super excited given where we started with the Marlins and with I think it was the Cardinals and the Phillies, or all the different teams that had issues with the coronavirus early on? I think it's sneaking up on a lot of people. Sunday is the final day of the Major League Baseball season, and then we're into the postseason. This is a big win for Rob Manfred, for the players and the teams, I think.
Well, good morning, Clay. I agree. This has been a big triumph, I think, for baseball to make it this far. There were a lot of days early on, as you mentioned, with the Marlins in particular, given the scale of that outbreak. It was very concerning, and there were some people that were calling for the season to be halted universally at that point in time. But I think it was important that MLB learned, adapted, found out the good ways to handle outbreaks and hopefully prevent them before they start, or when there is a positive test, handle it in a really thoughtful and proactive way. And so the game has really adapted, Clay, and I think in many ways persevered and thrived. I think the last week, among the playing population, there were no positive tests. Now, obviously, interestingly right now, Clay, I heard Rocco Baldelli, the Twins manager, say in an interview yesterday that basically now his team, as of the game yesterday, they brought their luggage to their home ballpark in Minneapolis, and after the game was over, they entered a hotel and they packed for 5 weeks. Because the balance of the season, even the regular season games, especially for the contending teams, they're effectively in a bubble now for the teams. Even when they're at home, it's a modified bubble, but it is a bubble now. I mean, they're planning to be apart from their families for 5 weeks, and then the journey begins next week in the playoffs. So the plan is there. The teams are adapting, and let's hope everybody stays healthy.
Okay, let's talk about the playoff picture. To me, the American League is effectively set based on unless absolute insanity happens, right? It seems like Tampa Bay, New York, Toronto, the White Sox, the Twins, the Indians, and the A's are all going to be your playoff teams, along also with the Astros, based on the numbers. Does that square with your anticipation? And if so, how would you assess the AL playoff picture in terms of whom you think is set up to have success?
Well, you're right, Clay. I think we know the 8 teams now. The Astros, of course, somewhat improbably able to get in there with a 28-27 record right now. They are, of course, the second-place team in the AL West, so they're not going to win the division this year, of course, but they're in the dance, with the Blue Jays being likely the 8th seed. What I've seen lately, it's interesting. The Yankees at the moment are the 5 seed, but they're playing the best baseball, I think, of anybody in the American League right now. They've got a plus 60 run differential, which is one of the best in the league, and they've won 8 of their last 10. They are really clicking. Offensively, they've now just gotten their guys back, Stanton and Judge and Urshela. Luke Voigt's been an MVP candidate for them in the lineup. They're a really good team right now. Their pitching has gotten in line a little bit. Jay Happ has pitched better of late, too. So there's a lot to like with the Yankees. Even as the 5 seed, just because of how they're playing right now, they might, even as the 5 seed, enter the postseason as the favorites to win the American League. And certainly we can now think about the possibility of a Yankees-Dodgers World Series that people have talked about for decades now. We haven't seen it since the early 80s, but I think that kind of a matchup is still very possible right now.
In the NL, the Braves clinched last night. You know this. I've talked about it on the show a lot. I watch the Braves with my son pretty much every night. He's a huge Braves fan now, and their offense is just on fire. When you look at the Braves, and we know the Dodgers have clinched, as you just mentioned, the overall number 1 seed, for what that is worth, are the Braves the best challenger to the Dodgers in the NL, or who would you say is the next team up if somebody else is going to potentially knock them out of the postseason?
That's a great question, Clay, because, well, first of all, please tell your son, I picked the Phillies somewhat.
I saw that, and I was going to read it. I was going to read you that. I saw you retweet this. I'm reading it right now. This was from back when the season started. Prediction: the Phillies will win the NL East. If they don't, I'll run the Rocky Steps in a Joe Girardi jersey. I expect an MVP year from Bryce Harper, and here are my thoughts. Anyway, so you obviously did not get that MVP year from Bryce Harper. The Phillies probably not going to make the postseason at all. They're an underdog at this point as we come down the stretch run there. So, yes, my son is excited over the Braves' big win. But how would you assess their chances and who has the best chance to potentially derail the Dodgers?
So I'm a little concerned, Clay, about their starting pitching.
Yeah.
In terms of how much depth they've got in a playoff series, especially now that in the NLCS as well and the NLDS, there are no off days. So in the past, you'd have off days that allowed you to go with a four-man rotation, or sometimes even a three-man with a little creativity in how you do it. But it's just not. It's not going to be possible when you're playing 5 straight days or 7 straight days to do it that way. So I think that the priority goes to the teams that have the most starting pitching depth. It's ironic, but teams that are just now entering the playoff picture, that are having to play great playoff-style baseball to just qualify, like the Cardinals and the Reds, they're going to be as dangerous, I think, to the Dodgers as the Braves would be, to be honest with you. I think that it's those teams that are playing sharp. We've seen this happen in hockey. It happens quite often where the 8th seed or the 7th seed in the Stanley Cup playoffs ends up making it to the final because they've had to play playoff hockey for the last month of a normal regular season, and they're sharp and they're used to it. I think that we're seeing that happen with the Reds and potentially the Cardinals, where they're going to be very dangerous teams. The Brewers, I'm just not sure that they're quite as deep in talent as the Reds are with pitching. So I think, honestly, Clay, for the Dodgers to be threatened, with all due respect to your son's team, I think their most perilous series will be the first one. And as long as they can get through that one, I think the Dodgers are in great shape. I still have some questions about their lineup. I think the Padres in some ways have just as good of a lineup as the Dodgers do. The Dodgers certainly are the best team in the National League, but the gap, Clay, between the Dodgers and everybody else is not very big in my judgment. It's there, but it's not determinative, I don't think. And I really believe the NL is going to be maybe not wide open, but it is far from a given that the Dodgers make the World Series.
We're talking to Jon Morosi. He's our Major League Baseball insider. Okay, let's go into what the postseason is going to look like, because I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. I tweeted last night, hey, to the governor of Georgia, hey, could you open up the Braves Stadium for that 3-game playoff in the first round? And a lot of people were like, oh, you're an idiot. Everything's going to be played inside of a bubble in the postseason. I think a lot of people, and I may be an idiot, but I think a lot of people are not very familiar with what the postseason is going to look like. First of all, it's expanded, so you're going to have 8 from the NL and 8 from the AL. But that first round, as you just talked about, the first round of only 3 games, right? So best 2 out of 3 is going to be taking place at the higher-seeded stadium event. So a couple of questions about that. One, that seems very, very arbitrary because anybody knows who's a baseball fan, anything can happen in a 3-game series. I mean, anybody can win 2 out of 3 against any team, particularly if you have just 1 or 2 decent pitchers. Maybe you got somebody hot in the lineup that hits a couple of home runs. Second part of that, is any team going to be allowed to have fans present in their stadiums for those series, or has Major League Baseball prohibited it? I know they're talking about having fans present potentially inside of the NL and AL bubbles in Texas and in California before all is said and done. But kind of take us into that universe, if you could, and what you know about those first-round series, best 2 out of 3.
Right. So first of all, the commissioner has actually said, Clay, that this may become, or in general, expanding the playoffs is something that he wants to do for the long term. So this is something we may have to get used to here as things go on. But yes, the first round is best of 3 at the team sites, then of the higher seeded team. So out of the 1, 8, 2, 7, 3, 6, etc. And then there are built in a couple days after that best of 3 round, which will be next week, to get all the teams to the bubbles, which will be in Texas and California, and then begin the usual best-of-5 division series, which will have no off days because there is no travel.
Yeah.
Same thing with the LCS, no off days. The World Series will still have the days off on a Thursday and a Monday during the course of that series, but in general, it's going to be played without off days in the first 3 rounds, that best of 3, and then the division series and the CS. From what I understand, the first round will not have fans anywhere. The commissioner has made that decision. And then the idea is that he hopes that there will be fans at the LCS and the World Series. Small numbers, small percentages. But what the commissioner said is that basically he likes the idea, and he said this at a recent event at Hofstra University in New York, that he wants to sort of get baseball back in the habit of finding ways to, at least in small numbers, safely have fans in the stadium, because it's going to be very important for the sport next year. And we've heard that as a common refrain from the NHL, from the NBA, that whenever they start their next season, they want it to be at a time when everybody feels comfortable, at least most feel comfortable, having fans in the buildings, just from an economic standpoint, and hopefully the health is in a situation where that's feasible by then as well. So that's baseball's plan. So we may see fans in the stands, LCS and World Series, but the first two rounds will be as they have been so far. And we're about to find out, Clay, how much home field advantage do you have in the playoffs when you have no fans, because that's going to be the situation for all those first-round series.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And as you mentioned, going into the next season idea, baseball is actually not going to be as fortunate as the NFL, which got the best possible calendar situation in terms of how its season could be able to play out, because it hasn't been impacted at all. But compared to the NHL and the NBA, which are going to have to come back sooner, baseball at least gets the benefit of being able to still finish in October like they normally would, and then sit back and wait and see what happens through the winter before we start to get back closer to the spring, when they have to think about what to do for spring training all over again.
Right, and we've seen, Clay, actually, teams have announced their spring training schedule with normal games returning in late February, and then, of course, the season's been announced as resuming on schedule in I think the later part of March, early April. So right now, again, it's a very important clause. Right now, that's the plan. Is that it's going to be a very normal looking calendar for the sport next year. What does it look like in terms of ingress and egress to the stadiums? Certainly, we've seen the NFL obviously have fans in many of their stadiums, and then I think that we've also seen soccer stadiums in Europe where they've resumed their sort of next normal season, they hope. And there's been a lot of temperature checks and other sort of testing that have happened, in terms of right at the point to make sure that the fan environment is safe. And so as science evolves, Clay, and hopefully the public health evolves, we're hopefully looking at a 2021 that's a little more normal than what we've had so far in 2020. But I think baseball is just trying to, and I think your question about the best of three first-round series, the commissioner, I think, just really wants to say, listen, we'll hopefully get fans once we're in the bubble, but let's really get to the bubble safely and with no active cases at that point in time. And I think that right now for baseball is the foremost concern. Get there healthy, and then once you maybe get one round in the bubble, maybe at that point in time, if you're feeling comfortable with the way that the protocols have worked, maybe you're able to welcome some small numbers of fans at that point.
Good stuff as always. He's our Major League Baseball insider, and believe it or not, John, next week when we talk with you, baseball will officially be in the postseason. Can't wait.
Can't wait. It's going to be, I think, a really fun October, Clay, and thanks as always for keeping me part of the conversation during the course of the season.
For sure. That's Jon Morosi, our Major League Baseball insider.